The trade winds move through the open-air restaurant like they always do in Maui, warm, carrying salt and plumeria, lifting the edges of the paper menus. It's mid-afternoon. The light is the particular gold that makes everything look like a postcard. She's on vacation, she's relaxed, and when the waitress describes the salad, she listens the way you do when someone confirms what you already wanted to hear. "Picked this morning," the waitress says. "Local farm, just up the road. No pesticides." She orders it without hesitation. The salad arrives in a wide bowl. Dark leafy greens, sliced cucumber, a citrus dressing that smells like the island itself. She eats every bite. And here's the question that will follow this story all the way to its end. Not what was hiding in those leaves, but what it means that the safest sounding food on the menu was the source. Because she did everything right. She chose local. She chose fresh. She chose unprocessed. She made the decision that every piece of modern food culture tells us is the correct one. Something in those leaves had already begun a journey. That journey started inside a rat. The symptoms would not arrive for another 7 days, which meant she had no chance of connecting what she ate to what was coming. She would fly home, unpack her suitcase, return to her life, and have no reason to think about that salad again. And there is no drug that kills what entered her body that afternoon. She finished every bite. To understand what happened inside her, you have to understand the organism responsible, Angiostrongylus cantonensis, classified in the CDC's Division of Parasitic Diseases and Malaria database as a documented, tracked, and emerging infectious disease. Its common name is rat lungworm. The name is anatomically literal. In rats, the adult worm lives in the pulmonary arteries, the blood vessels that carry blood from the heart to the lungs. Rats are what parasitologists call the definitive host, the species in which the worm reaches sexual maturity, reproduces, and completes its life cycle. The larvae pass out of the rat in feces. This is where the slug enters. Slugs and snails consume the larvae, either by grazing on contaminated material or through direct contact with rat feces. Inside the mollusk, the larvae develop through 2 molts to reach what's called the 3rd stage larva, the infectious form. When a rat eats an infected slug or snail, the cycle completes. The larvae migrate to the rat's brain, develop further, travel to the pulmonary arteries, mature, and reproduce. Humans are not rats. When a human ingests a 3rd stage larva, the worm does what it's programmed to do. It tries to reach the brain. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. It migrates toward the spinal cord. But it cannot complete its life cycle in a human host. We are, in parasitological terms, an accidental dead-end host. The worm wanders, causes damage, and eventually dies. But the dying is not the end of the problem. The dying is where the real destruction begins. Now here's the detail that changes everything about how you read a farm-to-table menu. You do not have to eat a slug. A slug crossing a lettuce leaf at night leaves behind a slime trail. That trail contains larvae. On an unwashed leaf, that trail is sufficient for transmission. Hawaii's warm, humid microclimate is ideal habitat for Parmarian martensi, an invasive semi-slug identified by researchers as the primary vector in Hawaiian cases. It is small, it is nocturnal, it leaves no visible trace on a leaf in the morning light. The freshness of the harvest is irrelevant to its presence. It may have crossed that leaf the night before it was picked. Day 7 after the meal in Maui, she wakes up with a headache, not a migraine, not the kind that announces itself with light sensitivity and nausea from the start. This is a pressure headache, deep and persistent, the kind that sits behind the eyes and doesn't respond to ibuprofen the way it should. She takes 2 tablets with a glass of water and goes about her morning. She assumes travel fatigue. The flight back was long. She didn't sleep well. She's been running on vacation adrenaline, and the crash is normal. This is the particular cruelty of rat lungworm's incubation window. Hawaii Department of Health data shows onset of symptoms typically occurs 1 to 3 weeks post-exposure. 1 to 3 weeks. By the time symptoms appear, the meal is ancient history. The patient is home, the restaurant is a memory, and the connection between a salad in Maui and a headache in a suburban living room is not one the human brain naturally makes. She adds stiff neck to her symptom list by day 9. She assumes she slept wrong. By day 14, something changes. A tingling begins in both hands. Not painful, just strange, like the pins and needles of a limb that's fallen asleep, but it doesn't resolve when she shakes her hands or changes position. Then the burning starts. It begins in her feet and moves upward through her calves, her shins. She will describe it later, in a way that makes the mechanism viscerally clear. It felt like her legs were being held too close to a fire, not touching the fire, just close enough that the heat becomes unbearable. She Googles burning legs and tingling hands. The results suggest vitamin B12 deficiency, peripheral neuropathy, anxiety, nothing that sends her to an emergency room, nothing that says, this is a parasite migrating through your spinal cord. By day 18, the burning is constant. She cannot sleep through it. She calls her doctor, describes the symptoms carefully, and is told it might be a pinched nerve. She is advised to rest, take anti-inflammatories, and schedule an appointment if things don't improve. Things do not improve. Day 21. She wakes up and tries to stand. Her legs receive the signal. They do not execute it. Not weakness in the way that fatigue produces weakness. The legs are simply not responding to the instruction her brain is sending. She gets to the floor. She is calm in the way people sometimes are when something is so far outside expectation that panic hasn't caught up yet. She reaches for her phone and calls 911. In the emergency room, fever, neck rigidity, photophobia, sensitivity to light, severe enough that the overhead fluorescents feel like a physical assault. The attending physician orders a lumbar puncture. A needle into the space between the lumbar vertebrae, drawing a sample of cerebrospinal fluid, the clear liquid that surrounds and cushions the brain and spinal cord. The result is the diagnostic pivot that changes everything. The spinal fluid shows eosinophilic pleocytosis. Eosinophils are white blood cells, immune cells that the body deploys specifically in response to parasitic invasion. In normal cerebrospinal fluid, eosinophils are essentially absent, 0 or so close to 0 that their presence in any significant number is immediately alarming. Her count is dramatically elevated. The fluid that should be clear and quiet is full of immune cells in crisis mode. Diagnosis: eosinophilic meningitis. The attending physician asks about recent travel. She says Hawaii. The physician asks, specifically, did you eat any raw or undercooked produce? Local greens? And this is the moment, lying on a hospital gurney, unable to feel her legs properly, 3 weeks removed from a vacation meal she'd already stopped thinking about, that she connects the salad to the floor she couldn't stand up from that morning. What happens next inside her body is, medically speaking, the most counterintuitive part of this entire story. There is no antiparasitic drug approved or proven effective for Angiostrongylus cantonensis in humans. The worm cannot be targeted and killed by medication the way a bacterial infection can be targeted with antibiotics. The standard of care, the treatment her physicians begin immediately, is corticosteroids, prednisone, a drug designed not to kill the parasite, but to suppress her immune system's response to it. This requires a moment to absorb. Her doctors are not fighting the worm, they are fighting her own body. Here's the mechanism. As the larva dies inside the central nervous system, it releases proteins. Her immune system recognizes these proteins as foreign and responds with everything it has. Eosinophils flood the area. Inflammation escalates. Tissue swells. This immune response is what causes the neurological damage. The eosinophils attacking the dying larva also damage the surrounding nerve tissue. The more aggressive the immune response, the more collateral destruction to the spinal cord and brain structures nearby. Her immune system, doing exactly what it evolved to do, is destroying her nervous system in the process of destroying the parasite. The corticosteroids are a calculated suppression, dialing down the immune response enough to reduce the collateral damage, while her body still clears the infection. It is medicine practiced in the space between two harms, choosing the lesser one. This is not a historical footnote. In 2025, Hawaii Department of Health confirmed a rat lungworm case from Kauai. Documented, reported, current. This is happening now. The cases are ongoing. The risk did not end when she left the island. She spends weeks in inpatient rehabilitation before transitioning to outpatient care. Recovery from rat lungworm neurological damage is not a switch that flips. It is slow, uneven, and honest in a way that medical outcomes rarely are in the stories we tell about survival. She walks again. But partial recovery is doing significant work in that sentence. The medical literature on rat lungworm outcomes documents a full spectrum. Complete recovery, partial recovery with residual deficits, permanent disability, and in the most severe cases, death. Her outcome is survival with residual nerve damage. The burning sensation in her legs, the one that started on day 14 and drove her to call her doctor, does not leave. It becomes her new baseline, a permanent reminder written into her nervous system. What's your experience with this kind of medical story, where the damage isn't from the pathogen directly, but from the body's own response to it? Drop it in the comments. It's one of the most disturbing patterns in infectious disease, and it shows up more than most people realize. Hawaii Department of Health tracks rat lungworm cases annually. Clusters have been reported from Maui, the Big Island, and Kauai. But these numbers almost certainly underrepresent the true case count for a specific and troubling reason. Eosinophilic meningitis is rare enough that physicians outside Hawaii frequently do not consider the diagnosis. A tourist returns home to Ohio, to Germany, to Japan. They develop severe headache, neck stiffness, tingling extremities. Their local physician has never seen rat lungworm. The workup proceeds down other diagnostic paths. The correct diagnosis arrives late, if it arrives at all. The incubation window that obscures the connection to the meal also obscures the connection to Hawaii. By the time the symptoms are severe enough to demand answers, the island is weeks in the past. Here is the systemic failure that makes this more than one woman's story. Hawaii Department of Health issues public advisories about rat lungworm risk. Those advisories are not posted in restaurants. They are not printed on menus. They are not mentioned by the waitress who describes the morning harvest with pride and accuracy because the harvest was local, and the farm was real, and the greens were fresh. All of that was true. Farm-to-table marketing actively emphasizes the qualities that correlate with higher risk, not lower. Local sourcing means minimal transit time, which means minimal processing. Morning harvest means the produce moves from field to kitchen quickly, which is presented as a virtue. Minimal processing means less intervention between the leaf and the plate. Every selling point is real, and every selling point describes conditions under which a larval slime trail on a leaf is more likely to survive to the table. Thorough washing reduces risk. It does not eliminate it. Cooking eliminates it entirely. Heat destroys the larvae. But a raw salad is, by definition, uncooked. The risk cannot be washed entirely away from raw local greens in a high-prevalence environment. The invasive semi-slug Parmarian martensi has expanded its range across the Hawaiian Islands since its introduction. There is no mandatory testing of produce for larval contamination. There is no warning on menus. The CDC's DPDX database classifies Angiostrongylus cantonensis as an emerging infectious disease with documented geographic expansion, language that means the range is growing, not shrinking. The phrase "picked fresh this morning" is a selling point. It has never been a risk disclosure. If you've traveled to Hawaii and eaten raw local produce, or if you're planning to, what's your reaction to knowing this risk exists and isn't disclosed anywhere at the point of sale? That question is worth sitting with and worth answering in the comments. If you follow cases like this one, documented medical events where a single meal, a single decision, a single moment of ordinary life becomes the dividing line between before and after, subscribe. Not for the algorithm, but because understanding what can happen inside the human body and why is one of the most important things you can do with 30 minutes. Join the people who watch these stories because they'd rather know. Go back to the restaurant. The trade winds. The gold afternoon light. The waitress describing the provenance of the greens with genuine knowledge and genuine pride. The salad arriving in a wide bowl, fresh and local and exactly what she wanted. The freshness was real. The local sourcing was real. The farm up the road was real. And those qualities, the things that made it feel like the right choice, the healthy choice, the conscious choice, were precisely the conditions that allowed a rat lungworm larva to survive on a leaf from the farm to her plate, to her bloodstream, to her spinal cord. No one warned her because the warning would undermine the entire value proposition of the experience. That is not a conspiracy. It is an incentive structure, and it is operating exactly as designed. Here is what you can actually do with this information. In Hawaii, with raw local produce, ask how it's washed. Understand that cooking eliminates the risk entirely. Know that if you return from Hawaii with a severe headache, a stiff neck, and tingling in your extremities, you tell your doctor specifically where you ate and what. Those 3 words, eosinophilic meningitis, can be the difference between a correct diagnosis and months of wrong ones. She orders salad still, but she asks the question now.